By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to tell whether or not you have insulin resistance, which often flies under the radar, and you'll know how to reverse it using some very simple and practical strategies that I've used personally and I've seen work with dozens of clients. And maybe you're thinking, well, my fasting glucose and my HbA1c are both normal, so why should I care about this? Unfortunately, a lot of the advice out there still focuses on blood sugar alone. Here's how we'll break this all down. In part one, we'll go through exactly how you can spot the hidden signs, going much deeper than HbA1c or fasting glucose. In part two, we'll go through a really quick case study from one of my clients so that you can better understand why it's so important to be looking for some of the hidden messages. And in part three, we'll walk through a proven game plan that you can use to reverse insulin resistance starting today. Last but not least, at the end, I'm going to include a bonus, which is one of my favorite tips for helping to prevent and reverse insulin resistance. Everything we're gonna cover is grounded in research and reinforced with client success stories. All right, let's jump right into it and start with how you can understand if you have insulin resistance. First things first, for those of you that don't know, insulin is the hormone that your pancreas produces in response to sugar in your bloodstream. Its job is to take that sugar and help your body get it into cells to use for energy. But when you become insulin resistant, your body starts to have a harder time doing that, so more sugar or glucose will remain in your bloodstream for longer. This leads to damaging of your blood vessels and other organs, and it's also what causes your body to start producing more insulin to try and accomplish the same job. This is ultimately one of the main compounding cycles that leads to inflammation and fat storage and metabolic dysfunction. So when we're trying to tell if you have insulin resistance, most doctors or healthcare professionals refer to two markers. One is your fasting glucose, the other is your HbA1c. The problem is that both of these are downstream measurements of your insulin sensitivity. Fasting glucose essentially shows you how much glucose you have in your bloodstream right now, which is heavily impacted by what you might have eaten in the last 24 to 48 hours. Whereas HbA1c aims to measure the average glucose you have in your bloodstream over the last 3 months. And the problem there is that you could go carnivore or keto for a couple of months and have some of those numbers normalize without actually reversing the insulin resistance that was leading to those numbers being elevated. So both of those are proxies. They're not direct measurements to show how effectively insulin removes glucose from your bloodstream. You basically want insulin to be able to remove glucose from your bloodstream as fast as possible. Because when you do have elevated sugar or glucose in your bloodstream, it leads to damaging of the blood vessel walls and your organs. The reason for this is that sugar is sticky. You know, if you've spilled some fruit juice on the ground and let it dry, it becomes extremely sticky. So when you have too much of it in your bloodstream, it can literally start to gum things up. It starts to attach to proteins and cells and different tissues. When people talk about being at risk for clogged arteries, there's been this huge confusion in the mainstream that clogged arteries result from high cholesterol. But in many cases, what's actually happening is too many carbohydrates, too much glucose, too much sugar in the bloodstream starts sticking to everything. That causes inflammation and damage, and then the body starts to patch it up with cholesterol. So the plaques themselves are cholesterol, but it's not the cholesterol causing the issue. I could go down an entire rabbit hole on that topic, and I have on other videos, but let's get back to the measurements you want to prioritize. The first one is your fasting insulin. This is a measurement of how much insulin you have circulating in your bloodstream when you're in a fasted state, meaning you haven't eaten anything. Considering insulin is the hormone that removes the glucose from your bloodstream, this is a better marker than blood glucose because it's farther upstream. Unfortunately, it's not included on most standard labs, so you will have to ask your doctor or healthcare provider for this, but in most cases, it's pretty simple to add. This is typically measured in microunits per milliliter, and ideally you want it to be below 4. Anything between 4 and 10 suggests you might have a little bit of insulin resistance, and anything above 10 suggests you have some pretty severe insulin resistance. The second measurement is a 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test. The oral glucose tolerance test, or the OGTT, is measured by drinking a sugary liquid and then testing your blood sugar at different intervals. So because it's not a one-time measurement like fasting blood glucose or HbA1c, it actually gives you a better idea for how quickly your insulin can remove glucose from the bloodstream. And measurement number 3 is looking at your triglyceride to HDL ratio as a proxy for insulin sensitivity. And this one, despite being a proxy, is pretty convenient because it's on your standard lipid panel. You can think of triglycerides as fat in transit in your bloodstream and HDL as the cleanup crew. When this ratio is off, it's like having a pileup of traffic and not enough of the cleanup crew. so it can clog the system. Ideally, you want this ratio to be below 1.5. Anything between 1.5 and 3 is a warning sign, and anything over 3 is a pretty clear suggestion that you probably have insulin resistance. And herein lies the issue that we ran into with my client Gary. When we started working together, he was roughly 255 pounds. He was starting to experiment with a carnivore-ish diet and different forms of keto. And after losing over 30 pounds in the first 3 months that we started working together, his fasting blood glucose was 88 and his HbA1c was 5.4. Now, when most healthcare professionals look at those numbers, they see fasting blood glucose below 100 and HbA1c below 5.5, and they say, this is great. Both of them are considered to be in the normal range. On the other hand, his triglycerides were 148 and his HDL was 43. Also both considered to be in the normal range. General recommendations are below 150 for triglycerides and above 40 or above 50 for HDL. So nothing about insulin resistance was flagged from these labs. But when he got these labs done after a couple months of working together, I pointed out that his triglyceride to HDL ratio was above 3. Which suggests pretty severe insulin resistance. His practice of daily intermittent fasting and sticking to a carnivore keto hybrid diet was getting all of his numbers into healthier ranges. But the underlying metabolic dysfunction that caused those issues in the first place was lagging behind. And here's why this matters. If we hadn't caught that in his labs, he could have gone on for years thinking everything is fine, but then being confused as to why he still felt frustrated and tired, and the remainder of his weight was having a hard time coming off. This is why tons of people out there struggle with their metabolic health. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they're either flying blind or they're just using the wrong map. So what did we do? We crafted a strategic game plan based on some very practical lifestyle changes. No super strict keto, no marathons in the gym, just some highly effective habits. Listen, I get it. This might seem complicated or overwhelming, and I'm sure you're incredibly busy. You don't have the mental or physical bandwidth to be focused on all of these nuances. I was too. I'm not some fitness guru that lives in the gym. Even though I run a coaching business, I still spend 8 to 10 hours a day working at a desk on screens. But I was able to shed 50 plus pounds and fix my own labs, all while being plugged in and still living my life. If I can do it, and the busy professionals and the overwhelmed parents that I work with can do it, so can you. So set aside the guilt and the drama, and let's just focus on some very practical habits and the consistency that you need to get real results. Now let's break this into 6 very actionable strategies that you can use to reverse insulin resistance, and will make it extremely practical and easy to digest. But I want to remind you, at some point, you want to get the more accurate labs done, because if you don't, you're going to be flying blind. Okay, here are the 6 things that I found to be most helpful for reversing insulin resistance. And stick around at the end because I'll give you my bonus one, which is one of my favorites. Number 1 is mono-macro meal composition. You want to try and focus all of your meals around 1 or 2 macronutrients. Maybe it's carbs and protein, like chicken and a sweet potato. Maybe it's fats and protein, like eggs, ground beef, and avocado. Or maybe it's carb forward, like primarily fruit. This might sound crazy, but the reason it's important to use this zoomed out framework is because everybody's different. But as a general rule, instead of consuming high levels of all 3 macronutrients at every meal, sticking to primarily 1 or 2 for the focus in most of your meals can actually help your body stabilize the insulin response. Above all, you want to avoid consuming high levels of fat and simple carbs in the same sitting. That's a combination that does not exist in nature. So it puts a very high degree of stress on your metabolism and leads to chronic inflammation. It's not a coincidence that that combination is the one that most big food producers have honed in on. Companies that produce chips and crackers and sweets, they lean on this combination because it literally tricks your brain, which never found these combinations throughout evolution, into lighting up like you just took a hit of heroin. So stick to 1 to 2 macronutrients per meal, adjust as you go, and remember, everybody's different. If you're severely insulin resistant, you're probably going to be best off sticking with fats and proteins, but there are success stories out there of people reversing their insulin resistance with mainly fruits and vegetables. Number 2 is to combine walking with sunlight. Walking forces your body to use up glucose, and it improves your insulin sensitivity, especially if you do it before or after meals. So I typically tell clients, if your schedule permits it and you can do 15, 20, even 30 minutes of walking before or after, your lunch and dinner, that's going to make a huge difference in how your body responds to glucose in the bloodstream. And if you compare that with sunlight, it's an extra powerful combination because natural sunlight improves insulin sensitivity and sleep quality, which also improves insulin sensitivity. Number 3 is to be mindful of your eating window and to try and move every day in a fasted state. Even if you're doing minimal time restricted eating, maybe you're fasting for 12 to 14 hours in a day, doing some morning walks while you're in a fasted state, maybe having some water and some high quality sea salt, that's gonna help your body ramp up the metabolic adaptation to be able to switch seamlessly between carbohydrates and fat for energy. And this is referred to as metabolic flexibility, and it is a cornerstone of metabolic health and longevity. Number 4 is to do some form of strength training throughout the week, even if it's light. By doing 2 20 to 30 minute strength trainings throughout the week, even if they're just body weight, it's gonna help you maintain and build lean muscle mass. And muscle is a glucose sink. It loves glucose and it soaks it up, especially when you activate it. You can think of strength training as a way to make your muscle tissue hungry for glucose. So the more lean muscle you have, the bigger buffer you have when you eat carbohydrate-rich meals before those carbs get converted into fat. The muscle eats it up first. That's why you may occasionally come across someone who's super lean and muscular that eats like a horse, doesn't gain a pound. Number 5 is to take apple cider vinegar. I typically recommend clients do 1 tablespoon in a glass of water, either first thing in the morning or before meals or before they go to sleep. You just want to make sure it's raw, unfiltered, and it says with the mother on it, signaling that it's filled with probiotics. Apple cider vinegar helps blunt insulin spikes and it improves your digestion by slowing the absorption of carbohydrates. And 6 is to prioritize hydration with sea salt. The electrolytes in sea salt help leptin signaling and they help you maintain stable energy levels. Leptin is your satiety hormone, meaning it makes you feel full. So balancing it is key for helping you stay on track without burning out or feeling like you're starving all the time. Now, a lot of times, somebody that has insulin resistance may also have high blood sugar, so they're told to cut down on salt. In reality, the best thing that you can do in that scenario is to decrease your carbohydrate intake, increase your potassium and magnesium intake, and keep your salt level fixed. That combination is going to be the best fit for most people to reduce blood pressure, reverse insulin resistance, and help you maintain even-keeled energy. All right, and here's my bonus tip, as I promised. When it comes to carbohydrates, you have either simple carbs or complex carbs. Simple carbs are digested more rapidly, so they flood your body and your bloodstream with sugar or glucose. And that ends up putting more strain on your insulin because it has a bigger job to do. On the other hand, complex carbs have more fiber, so they're slower to digest. The carbohydrates enter your bloodstream much slower, and some of them are trapped in fibers, so they pass through your system undigested, and they actually end up feeding the healthy bacteria in your gut. So why does this matter? Obviously, based on what I just described, in an effort to protect your insulin sensitivity, you want to try and prioritize complex carbohydrates. When it comes to some common sources of carbohydrates, like rice or potatoes, they're pretty high in simple carbs. So you'll often hear people, when they're talking about insulin resistance, suggesting that people avoid GPS, grains, potatoes, and sugar. But here's an interesting tip. If you cook potatoes or rice, and then you cool them overnight, so you cook them and then you put them in the fridge overnight, you can turn a huge percentage of the simple carbohydrates in those foods into complex carbohydrates or resistant starches. So the same bowl of rice, fresh out of the pot, will put more strain on your metabolism than that bowl of rice if you've allowed it to cool overnight. So for people out there that are trying to do meal prep and you love your rice and your potatoes, cooking them and cooling them can be a really helpful strategy to allow you to have your cake and eat it too. Just keep in mind, you can always overdo it. If you found this video helpful and want more content like it, please sub to the channel. It's free for you, but it really helps me out, allows me to make better videos. And if you're tired of guessing, or if you're like Gary and you're seeing normal labs, but you're still frustrated with some stubborn weight, book a free strategy call with the link below. I'll help you read between the lines with your labs. I can share a few more helpful frameworks with you. And if it feels like a fit, we can chat about potentially putting together a customized blueprint for you. In the meantime, feel free to drop any questions below. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you on the next video.